It's with a heavy heart that I come to you all today with a completed review of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets for the Gamecube. That's right, it's the second review in Harry Potter Month, Harry Potter Month, Harry Potter Month. Listen guys, I really wanted to love this game. It has so much potential. But nearly my entire playthrough was nothing but agony and pain. Every time it started to look up, something else would come crashing down, revealing further chinks in the armor. The version of the game developed for the 6th generation of consoles was created by Eurocom, and released on the 14th of November in 2002. It initially feels very similar to the PS1 version of the Philosopher's Stone, and many of the design choices are the same. I'd played through the beginning hours of this game several times over the years, and I remember being impressed each time. I came into it fully expecting to enjoy it. I figured there was no reason why the next-gen version of the game would be in any way worse than the PS1 counterpart. And the game does do a lot right, but the things it gets wrong cut so deeply into the experience that I was unable to have much fun. Anyway, the basic premise here, for anyone who's lived under a rock for the last 15 years, is that Voldemort is once again up to his evil schemes, this time through a blank diary that he uses to communicate with one Ginny Weasley. He ends up using her to try and open the Chamber of Secrets so that he can rid the school of mudbloods, all while growing in strength. Harry and friends once again have to figure out his plot and find a way to stop him. My issues with the experience started almost immediately. The options are extremely limited, and are missing a few critical choices and sliders like brightness and camera speed. At first I didn't think too much of it, but this issue quickly became a nuisance. The camera itself is pretty sluggish, and though you can actually control it here with the C-stick, this is only marginally useful because it's so slow. What makes it worse is the fact that the camera auto-resets when you move, and always tries to face Harry's back. There's no way to turn this off. Within 10 minutes, I'd made it past the tutorial at Ron's house, and made my way to Nocturne Alley by way of crash landing in the fireplace inside Borgin and Burke's. As you might be able to see, Borgin and Burke's is extremely dark, as is the rest of the game. I tried 2 different televisions, and both of them were far too dark, and changing the settings on the TVs themselves did nothing to help. I have a feeling it has to do with the fact that they're both LED HD sets, which tend to have a high contrast and really deep blacks. You can't blame that one on the game, but you can blame the game for not including an internal brightness setting. That would have fixed the problem plain and simple. Instead, changing the settings on the TV just makes the bright parts brighter and the shadows stay dark. This is really terrible during the nighttime sections, because there are points where you can't see anything without Lumos, and you can still hardly see anything with it. Once again, the game uses a lock-on system for combat and puzzle solving, and has an auto-jump mechanic for platforming. However, the game is much more deep than it was previously. It's clear when looking at the interface and some of the items you can find that the game was designed with 3D Zelda mechanics in mind. The lock-on system works almost exactly like Z-targeting from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and the inventory allows for mapping different spells and items to different face buttons. Famous Witches and Wizards cards now upgrade Harry's health when you collect enough, akin to heart containers, and every flavor beans work like a regular currency now, to be spent in Fred and George's new shop. Harry can also obtain several potion vials that serve to fully heal him if he runs out of health. The game is once again separated into exploration and going to class. Though yet again, bringing Zelda to mind, classes are now suspiciously similar to dungeons, rather than simply being made up of a short minigame and a tutorial. Beyond that, there's also a new separation between night and day. During the day, your focus is on school-related activities, with night emphasizing your time spent figuring out the overarching plot dealing with Voldemort. During the day, the school is yours to explore, and boy is there a lot to explore. I'd say that probably around 50% of the school is entirely optional, though most of it will only yield wizard cards and every flavor beans. At night, however, school prefects guard many areas, waiting to capture you and take away house points if they see you. Many enemies like ghosts and flying books also protect various areas, and ghosts in particular can be quite a problem since they can be quick, ruthless, and random in their appearances. Other than that, you can play Quidditch, which you could do in the previous game, but I failed to mention because it's so inconsequential, and there are a few mini-games and side quests to take part in if you're really bored. Okay, gameplay time. I'll start with the simple and somewhat meaningless problems. Flying on the brooms is fantastic. Quidditch is not so great. Quidditch matches start with the snitch in sight. You and the competing seeker fly through rings left by the snitch to go faster, as well as to charge up a turbo boost function. This is basically the same as the first game, but this time they decided, most likely due to the extra horsepower under the hood of the new consoles, that they should put dozens of obstacles in your way. Later matches get extremely hectic and cheap, with unavoidable Slytherin players, Bludgers, and even Gryffindor players running into you head-on at a near-constant rate. And each time you get tackled or hit by a Bludger, your character slows down slightly, and you need to fly through more rings to get your turbo boost. The player is very much at the mercy of random factors here. The new Quidditch commentary is great and varied, though it sounds off so often that you'll quickly start hearing repeated phrases, adding to the frustration.
That tackle was so hard, it nearly knocked both players off their brooms. Oh, that tackle on QC was really hard. That was a really heavy tackle.
Catching the snitch is no longer based on an on-screen meter either, so it's really difficult to gauge when to attempt to catch it. And the final issue comes with the fact that you aren't free to fly where you want during matches. You have to stay behind the snitch at all times. There are moments where the snitch will take a sharp turn around one of the towers where spectators sit, and you can't make the same turn at the speed you're going. So you try to go around the other side of the tower, only to be pulled forcefully into it and then be reset back on the course, now way behind. The player can lose each of these matches without any real consequence, other than minor changes to cutscenes, so I suppose it doesn't matter much. You could just go make a sandwich or something while the matches go on. I made sure to win each match for this review, but I have problems. On a side note, this leads me to believe that one can also possibly lose the House Cup. At the end of the game, it tells you that you can do side quests to get enough house points to win before you go into the Great Hall for the final cutscene. So one would assume that you can allow Slytherin to win, because let's face it, none of the other houses are going to. How in the world do such evil brats get so many house points anyway, man? Outside of Quidditch, there are troll-throwing minigames, and races, plus a handful of other side quests like finding lost items for other students. Not much to say about these. Now onto the heart of the problems with this game. The camera and the control. Though basic movement controls are smoother than previously, just like when flying, everything else feels significantly more sluggish. There's an extremely noticeable delay between when you input a control and when it happens on screen, especially for the face buttons. Even if you're fast enough with your inputs, there's still a chance that the game wasn't ready for you yet and ignores you entirely. This makes precise platforming absolute hell, especially in conjunction with the terrible camera. There's no sensitivity options, as I said, so it's slow and constantly tries to recenter behind you. That by itself could be forgiven. What ruins it all is the fact that you don't always have control over the camera anyway. There are many times where the game forces the camera to sit at a certain angle, most of the time during platforming and stealth sections, but the angles rarely show you where you need to be jumping, or where enemies you need to sneak past may be lurking. For whatever reason, the camera is almost always looking at Harry from the side, rather than from behind during platforming. And I don't even know how to describe what it's doing during stealth sections. To top it off, as the camera moves itself, your directional controls change, leading to even more difficulty. There are a handful of times where simple jumps become massive leaps of faith. They frustrated me to the point where I contemplated not finishing the game and calling this review a first impressions editorial. It's difficult to truly put into words how broken this is, so here's a montage of deaths caused by it. Now that that's over, the presentation is thankfully much better for the most part. The graphical style keeps up with the bright, cartoony style of the previous game. But it's done much better here, with a lot more detail, livelier animation, and everyone's faces are handcrafted rather than looking like snapshots slapped onto character models. The basilisk itself is absolutely great looking even today, and it looks like spaghetti when it's going into the statue's mouth during the final battle. Just saying. The music is great still, with a handful of songs recycled from the previous game, but the new songs are definitely a welcome addition too. The theme for Diagon Alley is one in particular that just tickles my fancy. The sound design as a whole just works. The narrative presentation is really the only point where things start to falter. Cutscenes can still feel stiff, and while the voice acting is better than before, the lines are sometimes ludicrously silly. The strangest thing is that the story is missing many major pieces from the movies and books. Dobby doesn't appear at all, Harry never breaks his arm, and Lockhart appears in Diagon Alley for a minute, and then once more briefly during Defense Against the Dark Arts. He has nothing to do with the finale at all. Most of the game is genuinely just filler, and characters comment on the truly important events as if they're commenting on what they had for lunch. I don't know how this happened, since the game is several times longer than the movie. You'd think they'd have plenty of time then to at very least fully complete the overarching plot and hit all of the vital story bits, but apparently not. Somehow, even through everything, the game stayed on my mind. Anytime I wasn't playing it, I felt excitement at the idea of picking it back up again, but that isn't enough. In the back of my mind, I still knew that I wouldn't enjoy my next play session, no matter how much I wanted it to come. The moment I would turn it on, I would be filled with nothing but anger and frustration, which is truly regrettable. This game has so much potential, and feels so grand in so many ways, but terrible control and a lack of simple, expected options has a high chance of ruining your experience. I'd say stay away from this one unless you're into the Chamber of Secrets. Next week will be The Prisoner of Azkaban on the PS2, so make sure to be back here next Wednesday. Hopefully it goes a bit better.